In Red Hollow, every stone in the desert seems to carry a memory. No one dares speak aloud. I've seen rotting saloons, soulless caravans, even ravens that repeat the sins of the dead. But there is one place that has always kept the city silent. The old dry well, forgotten on the outskirts. They say it was dug in the early days of mining, when thirsty men sought water to brave the scorching heat. But the water never came. What they found was only hard, cracked earth, as if the desert itself had closed itself off to hide something that should never be revealed. They abandoned the hole, and over time, the wellhead became covered in dry grass, broken wood, and red dust. For many years, no one approached it. Children were forbidden to play near it. Parents swore it was nothing more than superstition. But I learned early on that in Red Hollow, when everyone avoids a place, it's not out of fear of nothing. It's because they've heard something, even as a boy. I heard the wind blow through that void and thought I discerned something else. It was as if a child's voice echoed in the background. But logic silenced me. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe, but in Red Hollow, maybe is never enough. Now, decades later, when I walk through those dry lands, I feel the same chill. The well is still there, like a poorly made scar in the city's soil. And even empty, it seems to breathe. The silence around it is unnatural, as if even the crickets and coyotes avoid breaking the pact of silence that surrounds that whole dot. And this is where this story begins. Because on certain nights, silence isn't all that's heard. Some swear that from the dry depths echo the screams of a child. Screams that don't belong in the present, and who may never have belonged to the world of the living. But be careful when the desert decides to speak. It's not asking you to listen. It's asking you to obey. And I learned the hard way that the worst was yet to come. And it was at that very moment that the first screams were heard. Are you ready to go down with me into the well? That night, the wind blew like a razor through the deserted streets of Red Hollow. The sky showed no stars, only a pale moon, blotted out by heavy clouds, as if even it feared to illuminate what was to come. I had just left the dilapidated saloon when I heard it. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks. The desert has a way of playing tricks on the ears. A creak of wood becomes a groan. The whistling of the wind seems to call your name. But as I approached the path that led to the well, I had no doubts. It was a weak, scratchy voice, but clear as a whisper in my ear. Help. I'm thirsty. My feet stopped instantly. I know all the sounds that can come from the mouth of the desert, but none of them have the intonation of a child. The echo was too soft, too desperate. A cry of someone small, fragile, begging. The nearest houses fell into absolute silence. No puppy barked, no window opened, as if every brick knew what I was hearing and had made a pact not to react. It was a silence of complicity. Red Hollow always preferred to forget rather than face it. With each step I took toward the well, the voice changed. Sometimes it cried, sometimes it called for its mother. Sometimes it simply repeated, "Help me," in a tone that cut deeper than any knife. The most disturbing thing was the rhythm. The screams came like waves, as if they weren't echoing from the depths, but they spun around. Following my movements, I closed my eyes for a moment and listened better. It wasn't just a child. Behind that plea, hidden in the layers of sound, were other voices, some more distant, as if coming from within the earth. Some were crying, others were laughing. Their laughter was dry, cruel, like the laughter of bones rattling against each other. My hand went straight to the holster of my revolver. Not that a gun could hurt ghosts, but the weight of the metal always gave me courage on nights like that. Still, my throat felt dry, because the desert wasn't showing me just any ghost. It was reopening a wound, and every part of me knew this wasn't a call for help. It was an invitation to descend, to get lost. I took a step back, but the voices grew louder, as if they didn't want me to leave. A strange chill ran down my spine, and I realized something that made me freeze even more. The voice knew my name. Elias. Elias, get me out of here. I felt my legs tremble. I'd never told anyone in Red Hollow this, but in that moment, I knew for sure. The well didn't just hold screams. It held memories. It held stories the town had buried without the right to mourn. The problem was, now they were back, and they chose me as their witness. But I needed to be sure of what I saw and heard. And that's why, against all instincts, I decided to look into the well. What I saw inside didn't seem to belong here. If there's one thing I learned in Red Hollow, it's that running never works. The desert finds a way to follow you, even if you run to the ends of the earth. That's why, that night, instead of going home and pretending I hadn't heard anything, I decided to face the well. My hand trembled on my holster, but my step remained steady. The ground creaked beneath my boots, as if every stone were complaining about my presence. The wind, which had seemed only playful before, now blew straight from the well, cold and damp, as if invisible water still trickled from it. I reached the edge and felt the place breathing. Breathing, because that dry hole behaved like a living body. The air rose in irregular intervals, hot at times, cold at others, as if something were pulsing down there. The wood surrounding the mouth of the well was rotten, but intact, as if no one had dared disturb it in all these years. It was then that I heard it again. The same voice, childish, scratchy, pleading, "Help me, Elijah." What paralyzed me wasn't the request. It was the name. The well knew who I was. I leaned in to peer inside. The darkness was so deep it seemed to swallow my eyes. There was no visible bottom, only a shifting void. But as I strained to see, shadows began to writhe below. First one, then two, until a tiny hand emerged, white as freshly unearthed bones. Gripping the stone ledge, my body reacted, but I couldn't pull back. The hand had no strength to reach up. It just trembled, as if begging me to pull it away. Yet, when I reached out, something dissolved before my eyes. The hand turned to dust, scattering in the dry desert air. And that's when I realized something else. There wasn't just one voice. The bottom of the well echoed like a chorus. Children crying, children laughing, some calling for their father and mother. But among them, there were different tones. Tones that didn't belong to children. Deep, drawn-out laughter that vibrated like iron against stone, as if something much older mingled with the little one's lament. "Come down, Elijah," they said in unison, in a mixture of voices that didn't match each other. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a summons. I tried to pull away, but realized my feet were trapped. The ground around me seemed to have sunk slightly, sucking my boots into the dry earth. The well didn't want me to leave at that moment. The badge on my chest, the old sheriff's badge I carry like a curse, began to burn. It wasn't ordinary fire. It was a cold heat, like iron touching ice. It was the signal. Whenever evil rises in red hollow, the star weighs heavily on me. And in that instant, I knew the well wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a mass grave. It was a secret the town had buried, never to be spoken of again. But secrets never stay quiet forever. And when the shadows inside finally revealed themselves, I realized that I was not facing a child asking for help, but something much older, that used innocence as a mask. Looking into that well was like staring into a distorted mirror of hell. There was no visible bottom, only a darkness that seemed to move like a dense liquid. But as my eyes adjusted, shapes began to emerge. First, I saw a pale, childlike face with huge, empty eyes. The mouth moved silently, as if screaming breathlessly. Poe right behind it, another face appeared, and then another, until dozens of small faces covered the walls of the well, as if trapped in the stone, suffocating, trying to escape. Suddenly, one of them smiled, but it wasn't a child's smile. It was too wide, too cruel, a slit that stretched almost to his ear. And when he laughed, all the others laughed too, in a discordant chorus that echoed like iron scraping against iron. Then I saw the hand again, small, trembling, reaching for the edge. But this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it, dozens of arms stretched out, contorted, some thin as dry twigs, others swollen like water corpses. They moved toward me, as if they knew I was the only fool who had dared to look. I closed my eyes for a moment, but when I opened them again, I didn't just see children. I saw men, women, faces distorted by despair, blended into the shadows. Everyone whispered, everyone called my name, and then the background glowed. For a moment, I thought I saw a small flame, like an old-fashioned oil lamp. But when I looked closely, I realized they weren't lights. They were eyes, deep red eyes, observing me with the calm of someone who has all the time in the world to wait in that moment. I understood that the well didn't just hold lost innocence. It held something that used them, something that kept them as bait. And the more I stared into that darkness, the more I realized it was staring back at me. The visions weren't just illusions, they were memories. The well showed me fragments of a past Red Hollow had tried to erase. I saw men covered in dust, drunk with exhaustion, dragging themselves to that hole in search of water. I saw children running around, playing, unaware that the cracked earth would become their tomb. The collapse happened suddenly. The walls crumbled, and the children were swallowed before anyone could react. The miners tried to rescue them, but soon gave up, burying the tragedy in the dust. The town fell silent, erected empty crosses, and never spoke of it again. Now I understood. The screams weren't echoes of the wind. There were imprisoned voices, condemned by Red Hollow's inaction. The children weren't just asking for help. They were asking for justice. They were asking for the world to know the cowardice that had left them there, forgotten. But what chilled my soul the most was realizing that they were not alone. There was something else deep down, something that fed on each lament. After that night at the well, I was never the same again. No matter how many crosses I placed around him, how many rusty chains I tied over his mouth, or how many muttered prayers I let slip through my teeth, nothing was enough. Red Hollow doesn't accept cheap exorcisms. What belongs to the town stays in the town. In the early days, the screams came faintly, like lost echoes. I pretended they were just memories, trick of the desert-beaten mind. But soon they came louder. Each dawn, the voices rose from the depths with a clarity impossible to ignore. Sometimes it was just a child asking for water. Other times, an entire choir, crying, laughing, calling my name. Elias, Elias, always Elijah. The most disturbing thing was that they weren't confined to the well. I began to hear voices inside the house, first in the creaking of the wood, then in the whisper of the wind through the cracks in the window. Once I woke in the middle of the night with the sensation of someone pulling me by the feet. And I swear, the ground shook as if a subterranean breath was passing beneath it. And then came the dreams. At first, they were simple nightmares. I saw myself standing over the well, staring into it, unable to look away. But each night, the dreams grew longer, more real. I walked to the edge, guided by invisible hands, and inside, the red eyes glowed like live coals, patiently waiting for me to give in. One morning, I woke with a taste of dust in my mouth and realized my boots were covered in red sand. I didn't remember leaving, but there were fresh footprints leading from my door to the well. It was as if the place called to me in my sleep, and my body obeyed without resistance. It didn't take long to understand. The well didn't just want to be heard. It wanted heirs. It wanted to drag someone down, to continue feeding the thing lurking below. And somehow it knew I was the chosen one. The evil of Red Hollow had always followed me, but never this closely. I tried to resist, burned candles, prayed, and drove stakes around, but each attempt seemed only to intensify the screams. It was like poking at an open wound. The entire town seemed to breathe alongside the well, as if everyone were complicit in this. And deep down, perhaps they were. After all, Red Hollow has always lived on buried secrets. Today, I no longer delude myself. I know the pit won't stop until someone climbs down. And I know that sooner or later, he'll get what he wants. Because no matter how much I fight, I already feel his darkness within me, like a voice that never shuts up. Now, tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to look into that well? Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with anyone who enjoys a good horror story. Bear, and before the echoes of the night reach you, ... click on the next video that's already on the screen. Don't wait for the well to call your name.